the helmet spoke the first catechism of abjuration backward, each sacred syllable inverting into blasphemy. Frost bloomed on the inside of the visor like white flowers opening in vacuum, crystallizing with every reversed word that emerged from its vox grill. I am Lyra Dace, archivist savant to Inquisitor Valen, Ordo Malleus, and my palms sweat brine as I record this impossible fact aboard the strike cruiser Sanctic Vow, high orbit over Shrine Moon Sanctum Omicron. The helm belonged to Brother Castiel, recovered from Basilica Harmonia's transept spire 47 hours ago. It continues its blasphemous recitation without pause, ice spreading across the inner ceramite in fractal patterns that hurt to observe directly. When Tech Adept Hark attempted to voice the Emperor's name on Open Vox, his words atomized into static and a low triple knell that echoes through the ship's hull at precise 44-second intervals. I time each chime with my augmetic chronometer. The spacing never varies. Our target sprawls below us. Basilica Harmonia, a hive-scale liturgical engine whose ward chimes should girdle the continent against warp incursion. For 3 millennia, its hymnal broadcasts have protected pilgrim routes across the sector. The Basilica's choirs fell silent 6 days ago. In their place, that knell, 3 tolls marking time like a funeral drum, followed by silence that tastes of copper and ozone. Pilgrims vanish mid-prayer, leaving warm impressions on stone kneelers and rosaries still swinging. Surveillance pics show them genuflecting in familiar devotion, lips moving in learned litanies, then empty spaces where bodies knelt moments before. The scent of burnt incense lingers where they disappeared, mixed with the metallic tang of warp translation. Whatever took them feeds on prayer itself. The corruption spreads through sanctified channels. Hymnal data slates aboard approaching pilgrim transports report the same degradation, sacred words dissolving into static, followed by that measured knell. Prayer beads crack when touched. Blessed oils congeal in their vials. Any attempt to speak the Emperor's name above a whisper results in immediate tongue numbness, as if the very air rejects divine nomenclature. Inquisitor Valen observes from the reliquary chamber's shadows, his augmetic eye clicking as it adjusts focus. The Grey Knights maintain vigil around the corrupted helm, their nemesis force weapons humming with barely contained psychic energy. Justicar Mordian's psychic hood flickers with suppressed lightning as he extends his consciousness toward the relic, then recoils with a sharp intake of breath. The warp presence grows stronger with each cycle. He reports through direct mental contact, bypassing vocalization entirely. Something feeds on the inverted prayers, drawing sustenance from corrupted devotion. The helm serves as anchor and beacon. We cannot silence it without risking whatever binds the entity to this focal point. The triple knell sounds again, precisely 44 seconds after Mordian's psychic communication ceases. The timing suggests malevolent intelligence, a presence measuring our responses and adapting accordingly. Brother Castiel's helm turns slightly on its display pedestal, eye slots tracking movement despite the absence of organic sensors. I taste iron when the reversed catechism reaches certain verses, though I haven't bitten my tongue. The flavor intensifies as ice thickens across the helm's interior, forming shapes that suggest screaming faces pressed against transparent barriers. My stylus trembles against the data slate as I catalogue each impossible detail. Thermodynamic inversion, mimetic corruption of sacred language, temporal precision in anomalous manifestations. Warp storm fronts close our intervention window with terrifying speed. The astropaths, veiled in salt and sanctified chains, report Imperium currents shifting beyond navigable parameters. We have perhaps 8 hours before the storm traps us in system with whatever corrupted the Basilica's congregation. The Shrine Moon's defensive hymns protected 3 major pilgrim routes, their lost leaves approaching vessels vulnerable to warp predation across the entire subsector. Tech Adept Hark interfaces with the ship's cogitation matrix, mechadendrites weaving through blessed circuitry like steel serpents. His binary cant translates as frustrated uncertainty, when he reports Auspex readings from the basilica's structure. The energy signature registers as negative luminosity, not absent light, but active consumption of electromagnetic radiation. The sacred building draws illumination into itself, like a wound in reality. The basilica functions as a negative lumen well, Hark explains in measured binary. Photonic density beneath the high altar measures below ambient void levels. Vox reflection shows similar deficit patterns. The structure consumes rather than emits. Captain Lyris requests confirmation through encrypted channels. We clean the Auspex arrays, anoint the sensor housings with sanctified oils, recalibrate the machine spirits with proper ritual. The readings remain consistent. Basilica Harmonia hungers for light and sound, drawing both into its hallowed depths with unnatural appetite. The helm's reversed recitation reaches crescendo as ice completely obscures the faceplate interior. In the crystalline surface, I glimpse reflected words forming and dissolving, fragments of childhood prayers twisted into shapes that make my eyes water. The Emperor's name, spoken backward, becomes something else entirely. Not merely negation, but active invitation to whatever waits in the spaces between syllables. Valen emerges from shadow, his voice pitched low to avoid triggering another static cascade. Descent order confirmed. We deploy in 30 minutes. Full Aegis protocols, absolute Vox discipline. The corruption appears mimetic, spreading through the very act of prayer itself. I seal my data slate in rubberized shroud against humidity and affix my stylus with blessed chain. The Grey Knights run silent hand signs in tight formation, preparing for combat against an enemy they cannot yet define. Their Aegis-inscribed plate should provide protection against warp influence, but the helm's presence makes even their sacred wards feel uncertain. The triple knell echoes one final time as priority telemetry cuts across all channels. Telem update Sigma 9 arrives in clipped Mechanicus cadence, confirming our worst suspicions with clinical precision. The Basilica Harmonia's Auspex signature was not emitting sacred energy into the void. It was absorbing. The descent began 37 minutes after Telem update Sigma 9 confirmed our worst fears. We dropped through charged ash squalls that crackled with electromagnetic malice, our Stormraven's machine spirit keening in frequencies that bypassed the ears and struck directly at the base of the skull. The storm shouldn't exist. Sanctum Omicron's thin atmosphere cannot support such meteorological violence. Yet here we plunged through layers of particulate matter that moved with deliberate purpose, ash spiraling in geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. Justica Mordian maintained absolute stillness despite the turbulence, his ceramite form locked in meditation posture, while psychic lightning flickered across his forcehood's blessed circuitry. The other Grey Knights mirrored his discipline, Brother Castiel checking Psycanon feed mechanisms without sound, Purifier Enoch testing incinerator pilot lights that guttered and died in the storm's electromagnetic wash. Their Aegis-inscribed armor hummed with increasing agitation as we approached the Basilica's influence sphere. Through the viewport, I watched frost rime spread across the cathedral's buttresses in crystalline patterns that resembled liturgical script. Each tendril spelled words in languages that predated human settlement, ice writing that formed and dissolved in rhythm with that measured triple knell. The blessed stone itself seemed to weep, moisture flowing upward along carved saints' faces in defiance of gravitational law. Our insertion point materialized through the storm, the transept spire's landing platform, a narrow ceramite shelf jutting from the cathedral's eastern wall. The Stormraven's retro thrusters fired in measured bursts, compensating for wind shear that pushed against us with malevolent intelligence. Atmospheric pressure fluctuated in perfect synchronization with the anomalous emissions, the environment itself pulsing like a vast, diseased heart. We deployed in staggered formation onto ice that formed perfect lattices rather than random crystals. The Grey Knights moved with practiced precision, Mordian taking point, while Castiel established overwatch with his Psychonon humming hungrily for heresy. The weapon's targeting system registered multiple contacts moving within. The ash clouds, formation patterns that suggested tactical coordination, but visual confirmation showed only swirling particulate matter. The air bit through my robes with bone-gnawing cold, yet humidity levels exceeded saturation parameters by 47%, according to Tech Adept Hark's readings. This impossible atmospheric composition carried the metallic taste of ozone mixed with incense turned sour, like grave wax left too long in an altar bowl. Each breath condensed in patterns that resembled high Gothic script before dissolving into ordinary vapor. 20 meters across the platform, the transept entrance waited. Its adamantine doors bore relief carvings of the Emperor's ascension, but frost had accumulated in the carved lines, transforming divine imagery into screaming faces when viewed peripherally. The sanctified seals remained intact, though the blessed oils preserving them had darkened to the color of old blood. Purifier Enoch's incinerator pilot light died as he approached the threshold. He cycled the weapon's blessing rituals through manual gesture, anointing fuel lines with sanctified oils from ceremonial vials. The pilot flickered once, then extinguished again, as if the very air rejected combustion. Behind us, our Storm Raven's engine cowlings began accumulating that same crystalline script frost, ice words spelling themselves across blessed metal. The triple knell sounded from deep within the basilica's structure, 44 seconds since the last toll, measured to the millisecond by my chronometer. This time, the cadence had shifted, 3 beats becoming 4, then resolving into 9 faint ticks that felt like countdown without numbers. The timing suggested mechanical precision, but no clockwork could maintain such accuracy across the electromagnetic interference plaguing our instruments. Hark interfaced with the door's locking mechanism, mechadendrites probing blessed circuitry that responded with binary cant played in reverse sequence. Standard binaric authorization failed completely. Only when he introduced deliberate dissonance, canticles performed off-key, contrary to blessed harmonies, did the cogitation matrix stir. The machine spirits responded solely to what was wrong. Sanctified oil from nearby lumen shrines had begun dripping upward, black filaments flowing against gravity to trace impossible trajectories through the air. Each droplet formed geometric patterns before splashing against stone surfaces, pooling in carved inscriptions, and filling blessed script with liquid shadow. The oil moved with subtle purpose, climbing weapon housings and armor joints in thin threads that pulsed with the same rhythm as the transformed knell. Mordian extended his psychic senses toward the sealed entrance, his force halberd's blade flickering with pale fire. The weapon's machine spirit sparked with competing energies, blessed circuitry fighting for dominance against something vast that waited beneath the altar. He withdrew his consciousness with visible effort, psychic hood crackling. "It knows we approach," he transmitted through careful mental contact. "The doors will open at our touch." As if summoned by his words, the massive adamantine slabs began moving inward without mechanical assistance, their weight gliding soundless on frozen hinges. Cold breath escaped from the widening gap. Not air, but drawn exhalation that carried scents of burnt incense mixed with something organic and fundamentally wrong. The breath extinguished both remaining incinerator pilot lights in obscene little kisses, leaving us with blade weapons and psychic fire. Beyond the threshold, the nave stretched in perfect Gothic proportions. Choir stalls flanked the central aisle in serried ranks, and every seat was occupied. Pilgrims knelt in rigid devotion, heads bowed and hands folded, their garments dusted with ash. Their eyes remained open and unblinking, focused on the high altar with expressions of rapturous attention. Their mouths were closed, but where tongues should rest behind sealed lips, I observed only smooth, pale flesh. Unbroken skin where organs of speech had been erased by careful, impossible surgery. They sat in absolute silence, hundreds of faithful gathered in prayer without sound. The triple knell echoed again from somewhere deeper in the basilica's bowels, and this time one pair of eyes turned to look directly at me. They did not blink. They did not blink. The pilgrim's gaze tracked my movement with mechanical precision, pupils dilating in rhythm with that measured knell while her body remained locked in perfect genuflection. Behind her, hundreds of other faithful maintained identical poses, their synchronized breathing creating subtle pressure changes I felt against my exposed skin rather than heard. Justikar Mordian raised 2 fingers in silent signal. The Grey Knights flowed into combat formation without sound, their ceramite boots making no whisper against polished flagstones. Brother Castiel's Psycanon swept across the choir stalls, targeting reticule-painting amber dots on motionless figures who registered as living tissue despite their unnatural stillness. Purifier Enoch began sub-vocal recitation in Binharic clicks, sacred litanies caged behind teeth to avoid the hostile mechanism we had learned to fear. I approached the nearest pilgrim, an elderly woman whose weathered hands clutched prayer beads carved from blessed bone. The rosary remained warm against my palm when I touched it, suggesting recent life, but her flesh felt cold as marble beneath thin fabric. Her lips bore the surgical precision I had observed from the entrance, seamless pink tissue where the tongue had been excised with medical care, leaving only smooth flesh that pulsed with each heartbeat like a second mouth that could never speak. The crystalline frost accumulating throughout the basilica had begun forming script along carved pewbacks, ice letters, spelling words in ancient dialects that made my eyes water when I attempted direct translation. Each symbol dissolved moments after forming, only to reappear in different configurations that suggested meaning just beyond comprehension. The patterns repeated at intervals, matching the transformed knell, prime numbers ascending towards some predetermined total. Tech adept Hark's mechadendrites probed a prayer wheel mounted beside the central aisle, discovering blessed mechanisms that spun backward at perfectly even pace. The wheel should rotate clockwise during devotional hours, driven by faithful hands seeking absolution. Instead, it turned counter to sacred tradition, each spoke marked with sanctified oil that climbed against gravity in thin black threads. Harmonic resonance inverted, Hark transmitted through binary cant pitched below audible range. Acoustic absorption measures negative throughput across frequencies 2 through 9. Structure consumes prayer sound, rather than amplifying sacred frequencies. The implications struck with cold certainty. Basilica Harmonia had been designed as a liturgical amplifier, its Gothic arches and resonant chambers crafted to project ward hymns across continental distances. If the acoustic principles had inverted, every prayer offered within these walls fed whatever entity had claimed residence beneath the altar. From the high arches, ancient scripture banners began to move, not merely animated, but actively hostile. The parchment twisted, blessed words forming into sharp, whipping edges that lashed out at our formation. One struck Purifier Enoch's gauntlet, the sacred text peeling away layers of ceramite as if erasing the very concept of protection. Where scripture touched blessed metal, it didn't cut but erased, leaving smooth patches where sanctified inscriptions had been consumed. The triple knell sounded again, but the count had shifted. 3 tolls, then 4, then 9 faint ticks that seemed to emerge from the stones themselves. The progression suggested mathematical precision, prime numbers resolving into composite patterns that hurt to follow. My chronometer registered exactly 44 seconds since the previous sequence, temporal accuracy maintained despite the changing cadence. Mordian gestured toward the crypt access, where iron gates sealed the descent to older foundations. The barriers bore sigils I recognized from classified archives. Refraction Protocol Omicron, authorized by Magos Lexin Hest and countersigned with the tripartite cross of a prognosticar of Titan. The documentation suggested sanctioned modification to the basilica's harmonic systems, blessed by both Mechanicus and Grey Knight authority. A servitor hung cruciform against the gate, vox grill smoking with internal heat, while status lights pulsed in triple-beat rhythm. The cyborg construct chanted without sound, jaw mechanisms working through liturgical motions, while its throat produced only wisps of grey. Vapor. An auspex bead embedded in its sternum flashed in synchronization with the transformed knell, little green stars throbbing under stained flesh. As we advanced through the nave, sanctified oil from nearby lumen shrines continued its impossible ascent, black filaments writhing through the air like living sinew. They coiled around pillars, then lashed out, brushing against our armor. Where they touched ceramite, the blessed metal sizzled faintly, sacred inscriptions darkening as if burned from within. Hark's sensors detected additional modifications hidden within wall-mounted lecterns, blackstone fragments wired into prayer amplification systems, their anti-psychic properties inverted through unknown process to create resonance rather than dampening. The heretical engineering suggested collaboration between Mechanicus adepts and entities possessing intimate knowledge of warp mechanics. The pilgrim who had tracked my movement suddenly shifted her gaze to Justicar Mordian, pupils contracting to pinpoints as his psychic presence registered in whatever remained of her consciousness. Her prayer beads began clicking against each other with increasing frequency, bone-carved saints' faces wearing expressions of agony rather than beatific peace. Mordian approached the sealed gate, extending his gauntleted hand toward the embossed sigil, where refraction protocol Omicron resolved under accumulating frost. His aegis wards, sacred inscriptions hammered into ceramite by generations of psychic master artisans, began generating heat against his breastplate. Holy script flared with painful intensity, each letter lighting like a coal before searing angry welts into blessed metal. Steam hissed from armor seams as the plate took on the impression of blisters, raised lines of text swelling into tortured ridges. The Grey Knight's protective wards, designed to repel warp influence, responded to the gate as though sanctity itself had become actively harmful to approach. Sacred silver seared into sacred ceramite while an odor like burning blessed oil filled the stair aperture. When Mordian's gauntlet made contact with the seal, his aegis ward flared in agony. Holy geometry reversed its orientation upon his armor, as if mirrors had been set behind each inscription, sanctified script crawling like living things across ceramite that should have been inviolate. The gate recognized him, but not as we intended. Where the Justicar touched the blessed seal, sanctity blistered and turned inside out. Where sanctity blistered and turned inside out, Justicar Mordian jerked his gauntlet back from the seal. Heat crawled through blessed ceramite in rippling waves, aegis inscriptions glowing like forge iron before buckling into mirror script that hurt to read. Steam rose from armor joints as sacred silver seared against sacred metal, the protective wards that had shielded him through centuries of demon war now burning like brands against his flesh. The other, Grey Knights, experienced similar corruption. Brother Castiel's pauldron inscriptions heated to cherry brightness, holy geometry reshaping itself into configurations that made my eyes water. Purifier. Enoch's incinerator housing sizzled where sanctified oil touched blessed components, the weapon's machine spirit keening in frequencies that bypassed ears and struck directly at the nervous system. Formation tightens, Mordian transmitted through careful mental contact. Vox discipline absolute, our wards anchor the inversion. The realization struck with cold certainty. Refraction protocol Omicron required presence of aegis-saturated agents to stabilize the phase shift. The Grey Knight's blessed armor, inscribed with protective geometries accumulated over millennia, served as focusing elements for whatever transformation had claimed the basilica. Their very presence fed the wrongness, allowing sanctity to curdle like spoiled milk. They adapted with practiced efficiency, abandoning vocalization entirely for hand signs and binharic clicks. The Grey Knights moved like armored ghosts through nave shadows, each step calculated to avoid pools of sanctified oil that climbed pillars in deliberate spirals, seeking gaps in armor seals with predatory intelligence. Temperature readings fluctuated beyond normal parameters. Cold breath from the sealed doors now burned like menthol fire in our lungs, while frost accumulated on weapon housings despite rising heat. The atmospheric impossibility suggested we moved through layers of reality operating under different physical laws. Scripture scrolls began unrolling from wall-mounted cases, parchment moving with muscular contractions like pale serpents. They lashed out with edges sharp as monomolecular wire, each sacred word capable of parting flesh from bone. When one struck Purifier Enoch's gauntlet, the illuminated letters didn't cut, they erased. Ceramite dissolved where blessed text touched blessed metal, revealing raw flesh beneath that wept clear brine. Words are vectors, I typed with shaking stylus. Contact removes sanctity. The transformed knell sounded again. 3 beats, 4 beats, 9 faint ticks. But now the sequence originated from multiple directions simultaneously. The basilica itself had become a vast instrument, its Gothic architecture resonating with frequencies that built towards some crescendo I dreaded to experience. Hark's mechadendrites detected additional modifications within the crypt access. Blackstone latticework had been woven through foundation stones, anti-psychic materials configured to create resonance chambers rather than dampening fields. The heretical engineering required intimate knowledge of both Mechanicus doctrine and Grey Knight lore. We descended toward the catacombs, following the negative lumen gradient Hark's sensors traced beneath the high altar. The staircase coiled downward into chambers where light died rather than faded, my lumen globe, casting only struggling illumination that barely penetrated the consuming darkness. The air grew heavy with scents of damp earth and something metallic that coated the back of my throat. Moisture dripped upward from worn steps in silvery threads, each droplet forming geometric patterns before vanishing into ceiling stones. The triple knell evolved into a low, rhythmic hum that vibrated through floor stones and into my teeth. In the cathode-lit crypt, we discovered the source of our torment. Black latticework spread across ancient stones like metallic cancer, its surfaces warm despite the surrounding cold. The structure pulsed with reversed hymns, felt rather than heard, vibrations that resonated through bone and sinew. Human bone reliquaries had been wired into the lattice as organic capacitors, saints' skulls clamped with copper fittings, femurs bridged as crude circuit elements, their marrow channels threaded with fiber optic filaments that pulsed with sickly phosphorescence. Each relic bore purity seals centuries old, their parchment blackened without flame. The blackstone hummed when I approached, not true sound, but pressure against ear cartilage. Hark's auspex failed absolutely within 3 strides, display showing calm blank that meant full buffer saturation. The lattice consumed signal as it consumed light, drinking electromagnetic radiation like a wound in reality. Burned into the blackstone's heart, impossible since the material should not receive marks, appeared the tripartite cross of a prognosticar of Titan. The sigil's edges bled dull red as if the stone still remembered heat, identical to the authorization we had glimpsed on refraction protocol documentation. Recognized, Mordian transmitted, the thought heavy as dropped keys. This was sanctioned. The knell rolled through the lattice from within, arriving not as struck sound, but as if space itself were the bell and we its clappers. 4 tolls, then the whispering approach of 9 ticks that never fully resolved, like teeth almost closing on a throat. We stood before a machine that had been allowed to happen, its bone capacitors glowing with internal luminescence while blackstone ribs rose in geometry that refused proper angles. The air pressed against my lips, begging entry. I kept them sealed. Down in its center, something shifted, and the lattice's impossible angles seemed to lean, very slightly toward us. The machine was learning. And it recognized us. The machine recognized us, and in that recognition lay our doom. Hark approached the data altar embedded within the blackstone lattice, mechadendrites probing blessed circuitry that sparked with inverted current. The cogitation matrix demanded authorization, but standard Binharic protocols failed completely. Each sacred syllable returned as perfect mirror image, backward harmonies that tasted of iron on my tongue. Only when Hark introduced deliberate discord did the machine's spirit stir. He chanted, canticles off-key, sacred harmonies corrupted with careful precision, each wrong note making the bone capacitors pulse with phosphorescent approval. The altar required what he termed discordant mode, anti-prayer that fed the lattice's hunger for inverted sanctity. Documentation scrolled across brass lecterns in high Gothic script that reformed itself as I read, words shifting meaning between glances. The files bore classification seals from multiple authorities, Ordo Malleus, Adeptus Mechanicus, and the crossed halberds of Grey Knight Command. What emerged from those encrypted records chilled me more than the crypt's consuming cold. Refraction Protocol, Omicron. Sanctioned modification to increase Basilica Harmonia's empiric shielding through phase inversion of the Chord of Nine, the citywide hymn that had protected pilgrim routes for 3 millennia. The theory appeared sound in its bureaucratic precision. By inverting harmonic frequencies, the basilica would absorb psychic pressure rather than deflecting it, creating a negative shield against warp incursion. The authorization bore familiar seals. Magos Lex in Hest's sigil appeared beside the tripartite cross of a prognosticar of Titan, their combined authority sufficient to approve modifications that bordered on heretical innovation. One signature block remained redacted beneath sanctity glyphs that wept clear fluid where names had been burned away, the parchment itself rejecting whatever identity lay hidden beneath those blessed obscurations. Hark's mechadendrites traced fiber optic networks threading through the documentation, revealing schematics of the Cantor reactor, a harmonic Geller sub-engine positioned beneath the high altar. The device represented a marvel of archaeotech engineering, designed to channel empiric energy into protective harmonies broadcast through cathedral acoustics. But the modifications showed deliberate inversion of phase relationships, turning shields into beacons that drew rather than repelled. Environmental hazards escalated as we delved deeper into the files. The frost breath that had burned our lungs now seared like menthol fire with each inhalation, while sanctified oil climbed walls in increasingly complex geometric patterns. The substance moved with deliberate intelligence, forming sigils that dissolved before I could transcribe their meaning, each pattern pulsing in rhythm with the transformed knell. The documentation detailed a psalter of negations, 9 anti-prayers designed to align clergy minds with the protocol's inverted principles. Each verse instructed what not to believe, what not to pray, creating theological perversion that made my stylus tremble against the data slate. The faithful above, their tongues surgically removed, could no longer accidentally feed the machine through vocalized devotion. Brother Castiel's psychic hood flickered with suppressed lightning as he extended consciousness toward the lattice, then withdrew, with visible strain. The machine processes prayers like data, he transmitted through careful mental contact, converting devotion into sustenance for something vast. Justicar Mordian's presence manifested through sudden stillness, his third eye bleeding silver tears that froze before reaching stone. When he spoke, words emerged as whispers that bypassed sound entirely, felt rather than heard. Emperor's name remains safe in thought, he said without moving his lips, unsafe in air. The inversion feeds on spoken sanctity. The realization struck with terrible clarity as I scrolled through technical specifications. Phase inversion demanded presence of Aegis-saturated agents to stabilize transformation. The clinical language obscured horrifying truth. Grey Knights served not as investigators, but as components, their blessed armor providing psychic mass necessary to anchor impossible physics. Their very presence here completed the circuit, allowing sanctity to curdle into its opposite, while maintaining structural coherence. We were not hunters, but prey, drawn by duty into serving as focusing elements for heretical transformation. Every prayer offered within the basilica's influence fed the lattice, devotional energy converted through Blackstone resonance into nourishment for whatever entity claimed residence beneath the altar. The triple knell evolved as understanding dawned, 3 beats becoming 4, then resolving into 9 faint ticks that counted towards some predetermined total. The chord of 9, inverted through our blessed presence, built toward crescendo with mathematical precision that made my teeth ache. In the documentation's deepest files, I discovered marginal notes written in ink that shifted color as I observed it. Aegis presence feeds transformation. Proximity increases conversion efficiency. Without anchor, inversion collapses. With anchor, null formation stabilizes. The bone capacitors pulsed with increasing frequency, saint skulls grinning with phosphorescent delight as they processed our sanctity into something fundamentally wrong. The blackstone ribs expanded and contracting like breathing apparatus, each inhalation drawing blessed emanations from our armor into the machine's hungry core. The walls sighed around us, moisture lifting from stone while incense turned sweet for a heartbeat, as if the basilica approved of our dawning comprehension. Above, wood creaked in slow human rhythm that suggested the faithful stirring in their silent devotion. My stylus jumped across the data slate, as if drawn by magnetism, settling on the redacted signature block. The sanctity glyph blinked in rhythm with the knell, a pulse that matched the shipboard chime I had timed in orbit. Behind the blessed obscuration, I glimpsed familiar geometry, not the tripartite cross alone, but something else. A rosette's edge, partially visible through dissolving sanctity. The final entry bore yesterday's date and a single line that made my blood freeze. Phase inversion achieved. Recommend immediate evacuation before final manifestation. We had not brought our wards to repel the thing in the basilica. We had brought them to feed it. And someone had known we would come. Someone had known we would come. And that knowledge transformed our mission from investigation to orchestrated sacrifice. The blackstone lattice pulsed with increasing hunger as understanding crystallized into horror. We were not witnesses to corruption, but components in its completion, our blessed presence feeding something that shaped itself through negation rather than manifestation. The basilica consumed more than sound and light. It devoured faith itself, drawing devotional energy through phase-inverted resonance chambers and processing belief into nourishment for a nascent entity that existed as absence given form. Not demon, but null choir. Silence that ate devotion and grew stronger through theological perversion, feeding on prayers it prevented rather than corrupted. My narration slips into present tense as environmental pressure builds beyond tolerable parameters. The air tastes of copper pennies and burnt incense, each breath coating my throat with metallic residue that makes swallowing painful. My heartbeat becomes audible through bone conduction, pulse hammering against ear cartilage in rhythm with the transformed knell. Iron flavors spread across my tongue without source, as if the atmosphere itself bleeds. The triple knell evolves again, 3 beats becoming 4, then resolving into 9 faint ticks that count towards some predetermined total. The chord of 9, inverted through our presence, builds toward crescendo with mathematical precision that makes my teeth ache in their sockets. Each tick marks time toward manifestation, the documentation warned against witnessing. In the nave above, pilgrims begin vanishing with increasing frequency. Through floor vibrations, I feel their bodies disappearing mid-genuflection, leaving warm indentations on stone kneelers and rosaries still swinging from momentum. One moment a man kneels in silent supplication. The next only ash outline remains on flagstones, the impression holding heat longer than surrounding stone, as if some final loyalty resisted evacuation. The scent of burnt incense marks each disappearance, mixed with metallic tang of warp translation. The Grey Knights cannot speak battle rites without experiencing physical agony, their identities anchored by litanies that now burn their throats like swallowed coals. Brother Castiel attempts sub-vocal recitation of the Canticle of Cleansing, but each sacred syllable produces blisters on his tongue that weep clear brine. When Justicar Mordian tries voicing the litany of protection, steam fogs his visor from within, and the sound fragments into nothing like snapped wire. Their very nature, warrior monks whose strength derives from spoken prayer, becomes liability in the presence of something that feeds on vocalized faith. Identity phrase where creed cannot anchor. I observe their shadows lagging behind their movements, spiritual essence struggling to maintain coherence without liturgical reinforcement. Purifier Enoch adapts with brutal pragmatism, carving abjuration marks into his palm with combat blade. Each line weeps silver-tinged blood as he inscribes geometric patterns that remind his body who he serves without requiring speech. The blessed metal sears against blessed flesh, leaving raised scars that glow with internal heat. His identity, carved in pain, becomes anchor against dissolution. Environmental hazards escalate beyond atmospheric disturbance. Frost breath now burns like menthol fire in our lungs, while sanctified oil climbs walls in increasingly complex geometric patterns that suggest malevolent intelligence. The substance forms sigils, dissolves them, reforms new configurations that pulse with our biological rhythms. It learns our patterns and adapts accordingly. Through the lattice's fiber optic networks, Hark detects additional manifestations throughout cathedral structure. Prayer wheels spin backward at perfectly even pace, their blessed mechanisms consuming kinetic energy rather than generating devotional motion. Scripture banners hang limp as if underwater, sacred text, bleeding ink that flows upward to stain vaulted ceilings with mirror script. Telemetry break, Sigma 9, Hark transmits, through binary cant pitched below audible range. Astropathic scream detected. Inverted hymn pattern seeded in 3 outgoing pilgrim convoys. Systemic propagation confirmed. The threat extends beyond basilica walls. Every prayer offered within the cathedral's influence feeds the null choir, but the corruption spreads through sanctified channels. Hymnal data slates, catechism call and response sequences, vox beacons carrying devotional broadcasts. The entity grows stronger with each converted prayer, each silenced litany adding mass to its impossible form. Justicar Mordian's psychic hood sparks with suppressed lightning as he extends consciousness toward the consuming darkness, then withdraws with visible strain. His third eye weeps silver tears that freeze before touching stone, each drop forming crystalline patterns that spell words in languages predating human settlement. Proximity increases conversion efficiency, he transmits without moving his lips, words felt rather than heard. Our Aegis wards provide scaffold, ribs for its chest. Every second of presence strengthens manifestation. The realization strikes with terrible clarity. We complete the transformation circuit, our blessed armor processing sanctity into sustenance through Blackstone resonance. The entity demonstrates increasing awareness of our presence, manifesting as cold gaps in air that move with deliberate purpose. I feel it probe the edges of my consciousness, seeking childhood prayers and devotional memories to consume. A vox burst slips through the consuming hush. Someone speaks a saint's name, then screams, then nothing but static that resolves into that measured triple knell. The transmission originates from somewhere within the cathedral, suggesting survivors attempting communication despite mimetic hazard. The entity responds to transmitted prayer with manifestation that bypasses sight and strikes directly at comprehension. At the altar base, dust motes begin coalescing, drawing together as if pulled by invisible force. They form a shape, not solid but outline, silhouette of absence given form. A gap in reality defined by missing light and sound. The null choir takes shape as negative space that moves with muscular purpose through cathedral shadows. Dust arranges itself into suggestion of shoulders, head, hand pointing with finger bones of particulate matter across the nave, through frozen breaths and ash ghosts. The gesture aims directly at me. It points with hungry recognition, and I understand my presence here was not coincidence, but invitation. Someone had prepared a place for me at this feast of silence. It points with hungry recognition, and through that gesture comes salvation disguised as damnation. Inquisitor Valen's voice cuts through secured vox channels with authority that makes the air itself recoil. each word measured with surgical precision despite the theological horror he commands. All prayer ceases immediately. Litanies suspended under pain of summary execution. Replace devotional recitation with absolute silence. This order supersedes doctrinal protocol. The transmission ripples through cathedral structure via hardened networks, reaching every surviving soul within the basilica's influence. In outer chapels, pilgrims clutch rosaries with white-knuckled desperation, their lips moving soundlessly through learned prayers that muscle memory demands, but survival forbids. Decades of devotional conditioning war against the impossible edict. Scholar wardens receive the directive on brass data slates and balk visibly, their training revolting against commands that approach heretical territory. Several refuse outright, vox responses crackling with indignation before cutting to static. Within minutes, those channels fall permanently silent, leaving only the measured triple knell echoing through abandoned corridors at precisely 44-second intervals. The bureaucratic nightmare unfolds with terrifying efficiency. Squads of grey knights move through nave sections, confiscating hymnals, severing amplification systems, sealing chapel doors with blessed wax that hardens like ceramite. Their storm shields bear fresh scratches where scripture scrolls have lashed out, sacred text parting blessed metal like monomolecular wire. Purifier Enoch adapts with brutal pragmatism, drawing his combat blade to carve deeper abjuration marks into his palm. Blessed silver mixes with blood as he inscribes geometric patterns that remind his body, who he serves without requiring vocalization. The sacred metal sears against flesh, leaving raised scars that glow with internal heat. His identity, anchored in pain rather than prayer, becomes lifeline against dissolution. Body horror manifests immediately in those who attempt devotion. Anyone trying to sing experiences physiological revolt. Clear brine weeps from eyes and nose, while throat tissues swell as if rejecting vocalization at cellular level. One novice clasps her larynx, veins darkening with quicksilver lattice as if script inks itself inside her vessels. The mimetic corruption punishes devotional expression through biological imperative. Environmental conditions shift in response to reduced prayer flow. Humidity spikes beyond saturation parameters, marble surfaces beginning to weep condensation that runs upward along carved saints' faces. The moisture carries metallic taste that burns like dilute acid where it touches exposed skin, each droplet seeking gaps in armor, seals with predatory intelligence. Through the blackstone lattice, I observe the null choir's response to enforced silence. The entity falters, its outline wavering like heat shimmer, as devotional energy decreases throughout the cathedral. Dust motes scatter and reform with less coherence, the pointing gesture losing definition as fewer prayers feed its manifestation. But systemic damage spreads beyond immediate containment. Tech adept harks mechadendrites trace corruption through sanctified channels. Hymnal data slates throughout 3 pilgrim convoys display inverted text. Prayer beads crack when touched. Blessed oils congeal in their vials. The pattern propagates through devotional networks faster than physical travel, riding prayer frequencies like virus through blessed circuitry. Justicar Mordian's psychic hood sparks with suppressed lightning as he maintains mental barriers against intrusion. His third eye bleeds silver tears that freeze instantly, each crystalline drop spelling words in languages predating human settlement. The psychic strain of silence, for a warrior monk whose strength derives from vocalized creed, manifests as visible deterioration. Through careful mental contact, avoiding vocalization entirely, Mordian transmits revelation that chills me more than environmental hazard. This pattern is familiar. A world in the Ilex March. Refraction attempted. Authority shared between Mechanicus and Malleus. The counterseal matched. The image arrives unbidden. A rosette's edge buried in sanctity glyphs, identical to redacted authorization blocks we discovered earlier. Valen's augmetic eye clicks through apertures, irises nesting inside one another like cold metal flowers. He receives the psychic transmission and returns only orders, blank as winter stone. Continue suppression, prioritize amplifiers, maintain silence. The entity demonstrates increasing awareness despite reduced sustenance, manifesting through dust arrangement above the altar. Particulate matter coalesces into familiar geometry, not random swirl, but deliberate pattern. An inquisitorial rosette forms in perfect detail, each skull and crossbones element precisely rendered in floating ash. The image holds for measured heartbeat, then dissolves with insulting ease. Only the prognosticar's tripartite cross remains, burning with phosphorescent approval, while the fourth knell begins counting down towards some predetermined crescendo. Through secured channels, Valen's voice returns with weight of terrible understanding. Pattern propagation confirmed beyond local containment. Astropathic choir reports systemic contamination across subsector devotional networks. Refraction protocol requires completion. His final transmission carries confession wrapped in operational necessity. Authorization was mine. I signed the counterseal. We are here because I brought us here. The null choir points again. Dust-mote finger tracking across frozen nave toward each of us in turn. Its gesture encompasses not random victims, but carefully selected components in a machine designed by familiar authority. Through the entity's recognition, I understand our presence here was never investigation, but orchestrated sacrifice. Above the altar, ash arranges itself into Valen's personal sigil, ornate rosette marking authority and complicity in equal measure. The image burns briefly, then erases itself like guilty conscience, leaving only that measured triple knell echoing through cathedral bones. We came as hunters and discovered ourselves to be prey, delivered by the very authority we serve, to feed a silence that grows stronger with each prayer it prevents. The entity knows who created it, and through that knowledge, it recognizes us all. The entity recognizes us all, and Valen's confession leaves no space for outrage, only action shaped like heresy. His transmission cuts across hardened channels with surgical precision. Unhallow the basilica, bleed it of sanctity, starve the choir. The order moves through grey nights with inevitability of blade-finding sheath, duty demanding what doctrine forbids. Tech-adept Hark unfurls copper-veined schematics that weep brine as ink shifts, polarity swap routes mapped through choir lofts into the Blackstone's hungry heart. We arrange phase dampers like profane relics, each device etched with cancellations of blessings I've copied countless times, but never spoken in reverse. Mechanicus adjuncts position themselves at lattice nodal points, preparing to chant Binharik in minor keys, sacred harmonies dragged flat until machine spirits shudder in revulsion. The technical liturgy makes my stylus tremble. Polarity inversions demand precise timing, blessed circuitry rewired to perform functions approaching heretical innovation. Where sacred meets profane through careful engineering, sparks cascade in nameless colors, electromagnetic discharge painting impossible spectra across cathedral. Shadows. The machine spirit's keening becomes audible, frequency rising beyond human perception into ranges that make teeth ache. Environmental changes manifest immediately. Frost melts into oily brine pooling in carved inscriptions, blessed script filling with liquid shadow. Incense gutters in wall-mounted sensors, sacred smoke collapsing into particulate matter falling like black snow. Candles flare once with desperate brightness, then invert, blue cones burning downward into wax, consuming light rather than generating illumination. Personal cost comes due in flesh. Justicar Mordian unseals his breastplate with ritual locks, exposing skin furrowed by old oaths. Without word, he incises fresh wards directly into sternum with monoblade warmed over inverted flame, carving geometry precise as any scribe's hand. Silver filigree wire threads beneath skin with augmetic pliers, each loop anchored to bone with sanctified staples. Blood steams in cold, running clear where it touches Blackstone dust. Brother Castiel follows, inscribing wards beneath armor plates, while Purifier Enoch carves deeper abjuration marks, weaving between existing scars. His palm becomes palimpsest of devotion, written in pain, each line reminding his body who he serves when prayer becomes impossible. Blessed combat blade cuts through skin healing around silver wire, creating hybrid of flesh and sacred metal, pulsing with heartbeat. Telemetry Sigma 9, hark transmits through binary cant. Chord of 9 collapsing to chord of 4, partial starvation achieved. The triple knell hiccups, 3 beats, 2, then 4. Silence following carries tremor like held breath. Above, pilgrims exhale without vanishing for first time in hours. We descend via elevator moving without cables. Hexagonal platform responding to pressure sequences, hark taps with mechadendrite backs. Floor lurches without motion, walls shearing into facets misaligned with platform angles. Gravity refuses declaration while shadows hang sideways, stained glass sliding past through stone as if basilica trespasses on itself. Each 44th second brings soft click, world-adjusting teeth on hidden gears. The reactor chamber pretends chapel by wearing its bones. Iron rails form crude choir stalls around spherical heart-sized like Land Raider, blackstone plates riveted with iron skulls. Every jaw clamps reliquary fragments, teeth sunk into bone. Mercury veins pulse backward between skulls, fluid leaping into tributaries rather than flowing down. The sphere sings hymns backward without sound, felt in lifting arm hair despite cold. Hark's mechadendrites probe, each contact burning with frostbite. Within ports disguised as reliquary recesses, data guts older than any Sanctum Omicron archive pulse with heat and blackstone flecks. Translation comes through touch. Cantor reactor, whose heart was never entirely machine. Architects found something in Moon's bedrock bending sound into shapes, names into doorways. They bricked it with blackstone ribs, called it sanctuary. Files justify refraction with perfect seals, speaking of ward resilience and catching warp pressure. They never write demon, only reliquary, engine, lies hiding what language does to hands. But logs stutter in shame, admitting lineage bound, not sanctified, muzzled, not glorified. Blackstone soothed edges like cold compress over fever, hymns holding teeth dull until inversion taught it biting through silence. The sphere recognizes damper mathematics, vibrating in fractional movements, not anger but attention, hound lifting head at remembered footfall. Older than refraction, more patient than any choir, the protocol hadn't birthed it, but lifted hood from eyes, turning it toward us. Telemetry cuts through chamber. Chord of 4 stable. Central resonance increasing. The hungry heart noticed peripheral silence, drew breath from only place unstressed, our presence thrumming through iron skulls into sphere, Aegis wards providing scaffolding around growing void. Iron jaws loosened incrementally. Skulls weren't ornaments but clamps, and clamps fail. Around platform, inverted flames lengthened, blue-black and whispering. Mordian's fresh filigree tightened like bowstrings, breath steady as unspoken psalm. Logs ended on line Basilica tried editing, bound, not blessed. Something mistaken for shield 3,000 years turned to face us fully. Refraction hadn't made this thing. It had uncovered it. It had uncovered it. And now, the ancient thing beneath Sanctum Omicron's bedrock, stretched limbs 3 millennia cramped by blackstone restraints. The iron skulls clamped around the sphere loosened with metallic sighs, mercury veins pulsing backward as clamps designed to contain began serving to conduct. The reactor's hymns gained substance felt through bone, vibrations that made my teeth chatter in rhythm with the collapsing chord of 4. The null choir took shape around us, not manifestation, but absence given form. Silhouettes that were gaps in reality stepped from the negative luminance pooling around blackstone ribs, their edges stuttering where my gaze tried to grasp them like torn film. They glided where saints should stand, outlines defined by missing light and consumed sound, darkness that moved with muscular purpose through cathedral shadows. Combat became exercise in silent brutality. Brother Castiel's Psy-Cannons swept across the formations, targeting reticule painting amber dots on figures that registered as void rather than substance. When he fired, the weapon's roar vanished instantly, promethium gushing in white-orange fans that should have thundered but fell inward, devoured before sound could exist. Heat remained, greasy warmth that clung to armor joints, but acoustics died in hungry throats. Nemesis force weapons flickered and sputtered when swung through silence. Purifier Enoch's halberd sparked against empty air, blessed circuits overloading as they sought, targets that existed as negation rather than substance. The weapon's machine spirit keened in frequencies that bypassed ears, striking directly at nervous systems, while combat doctrines failed against enemies defined by what they were not. They learned with terrifying speed that spoken words fueled the choir's manifestation. Each vocalized battle cry strengthened their forms, devotional energy converted through Blackstone resonance into substance that moved with predatory intelligence. Silence became shield, the only protection against enemies that fed on faith itself. Justicar Mordian raised 2 fingers in tactical signal, and the Grey Knights adapted with practiced efficiency. Hand signs replaced vox commands. Boot stamps marked formations. They moved like armored ghosts through nave shadows, each step calculated to avoid pools of sanctified oil that climbed pillars in deliberate spirals, seeking gaps in armor seals with predatory purpose. Body horror manifested immediately. Tongues blackened and shriveled if mouths opened beyond necessity, breath condensing inside helmets as respiratory systems rejected vocalization at cellular level. Brother Castiel removed his helm briefly, revealing lips cracked like old parchment, tongue darkened to charcoal where it had attempted forming words. Steam rose from his oral cavity, as if prayers burned before reaching air. My vox corda registered nothing but stamps and heartbeats, electronic components unable to process absence as data. I narrated by thinking, typing to brass stylus with fingers that shook despite ceramite heating. The device's machine spirit struggled with concepts beyond programming, display showing calm blank where readings should appear. The null figures demonstrated increasing coordination, moving in formations that mirrored Grey Knight's tactics, but rendered in negative space. They flanked through shadows, established overlapping fields of absence, executed maneuvers that suggested tactical intelligence, adapted from observing our deployment patterns. The enemy learned by consuming what we were. Through the sphere's mercury veins, Tech Adept Hark detected systematic propagation beyond local containment. Telemetry Sigma 9, he transmitted through binary cant pitched below audible range. Astropathic scream detected. Inverted hymn pattern rode Pilgrim's prayer bead into choir loft. Off-world propagation confirmed. The realization struck with cold certainty. The pattern spread through sanctified channels. Hymnal data slates throughout pilgrim convoys displaying mirror script, catechism call and response sequences, returning backward echoes. Vox beacons carrying devotional broadcasts across the subsector. Every prayer offered anywhere within influenced range fed the growing choir. Environmental hazards escalated beyond atmospheric disturbance. Sanctified oil climbed walls in spirals that spelled words in languages predating human settlement, each letter dissolving before comprehension but leaving impressions like fading nightmares. The substance probed armor seals with deliberate intelligence, whispering promises in frequencies felt through bone conduction. The sphere pulsed with increasing frequency, iron skulls grinning with phosphorescent delight as they processed our presence into nourishment. Each Aegis ward provided psychic mass necessary to anchor impossible physics, blessed inscriptions serving as focusing elements for transformation that turned sanctity into sustenance through Blackstone resonance. One silhouette extended what might have been an arm toward my robe. Fabric didn't tear. It unwove itself where contact occurred, threads deciding in orderly fashion to be simply not here. The hem lifted like snake-shedding skin without malice. Malice required human luxury of story. This was appetite that wanted only numbers. Above the altar, Dust motes coalesced into familiar geometry. Inquisitorial rosette rendered in perfect detail. Each skull and crossbones element precisely formed in floating ash. The image held for measured heartbeat, then dissolved with insulting ease, leaving only Prognosticar's tripartite cross-burning with phosphorescent approval. Through careful mental contact, Justicar Mordian transmitted tactical assessment. Pattern propagation confirmed across 3 convoy routes. Astropathic contamination spreads faster than physical travel. Local suppression insufficient. Threat now systemic. Time collapsed as the window narrowed. We faced cascading failure across devotional networks. Each prayer offered anywhere within the subsector feeding manifestation that grew stronger through theological perversion. The null choir pointed with dust-mote fingers, their gesture encompassing not random victims, but carefully selected components in machine designed by familiar authority. The triple knell evolved, 3 beats becoming 4, then 9 faint ticks, counting toward crescendo I dreaded to witness. Mercury flowed backward through iron veins while the choir sang without sound. Harmony felt in lifting arm hair and chattering teeth. We were components now, not hunters. And the machine was almost complete. The machine was almost complete. And in that recognition lay the weight of choices that felt like selecting between varieties of damnation. We withdrew to a stained-glass chamber off the transept, where dim panes filtered light through scenes of martyrdom rendered in crimson and ash-grey. The air pressed against us with metallic taste, each breath coating throats with residue that made swallowing painful. Ash began falling indoors like slow snow, each flake settling on devotional ledges with deliberate precision. The environmental impossibility struck me with clinical clarity. Atmospheric particulate matter moving through sealed cathedral spaces, defying ventilation patterns while accumulating on armor joints and weapon housings. My chronometer marked 44 seconds between each settling pulse, synchronized with that measured triple knell echoing through basilica bones. Strategic council convened through hand signs and encrypted data bursts, voices pitched below the threshold that triggered mimetic cascade. Justicar Mordian positioned storm shields to deflect scripture lashes probing the threshold like testing tongues, while tech-adept Hark chalked polarity sigils across floorstones, mapping angles where sound died fastest. Inquisitor Valen placed his rosette on the table without ceremony, augmetic eye clicking through apertures as irises nested inside one another like cold metal flowers. Through secured channels hardened against psychic intrusion, his transmission carried weight of terrible mathematics. 3 tactical options. Sever astropathic choir, risk storm stranding. Attempt total inversion at core, risk Aegis integrity collapse. Prepare Exterminatus authorization. The first option demanded sacrificing communication across the subsector, severing astropathic links to prevent pattern propagation through devotional networks. Cutting the choir meant blinding sanctioned souls with iron and salt, burning conduits, crashing beacon buoys. The warp storm closing around Sanctum Omicron made isolation catastrophic. Friendly vessels trapped in tightening weather of knives, while null choir manifestation continued unchecked. Total inversion at the sphere's heart offered tactical solution wrapped in spiritual suicide. The Aegis lattice that made Grey Knights resilient also completed the enemy's focusing geometry. To break the circuit, someone would have to unmake himself, extinguishing blessed wards that anchored identity to creed. Purifier. Enoch stepped forward, carving words into his palm with combat blade rather than risk vocalization. The inscription read, "Silence of Titan, forbidden rite where Grey Night becomes null space to starve entities feeding on sanctity." The discipline demanded temporary dissolution, warrior monk choosing spiritual death over tactical failure. Military calculus meets religious imperative, I typed with stylus that trembled against data slate surface. Knight without Aegis becomes ordinary man facing impossible horror. Survival probability approaches 0. Environmental conditions shifted as understanding crystallized. Humidity spiked beyond saturation parameters. marble surfaces weeping condensation that ran upward along carved saints' faces. Sanctified oil climbed pillars in geometric spirals, black filaments seeking gaps in armor seals with predatory intelligence. Valen's breathing pattern changed, recognition from years serving Ordo Malleus authority. His augmetic eye focused on documents that shouldn't exist, mechanical precision adjusting to read authorization blocks, bearing familiar geometry. The sound carried weight of decision already made, bureaucratic inevitability grinding toward predetermined conclusion. Exterminatus pre-authorization initiated. His voice emerged through hardened vox with weight of autarch-level clearance. Cyclonic torpedoes armed aboard Sanctic Vow. Execution withheld pending local inversion attempt. Timeline: 97 minutes to orbital bombardment window. The authorization bore seals I recognized from classified archives. Planetary death sanctioned through channels bypassing normal inquisitorial oversight. Valen produced adamantine wafer from seal satchel, etched sigils crawling at vision's edge as he placed palm against blessed metal. Veins in his wrist lit like small rivers while pre-authorization engaged, second confirmation code waiting like sleeping predator. Through the chamber's acoustic properties, I heard machinery awakening aboard Sanctic Vow, cyclonic warheads cycling through blessing rituals, saint-etched housings preparing for planetary sterilization. The strike cruiser's machine spirits sang hymns of ending while targeting cogitators painted Sanctum Omicron with crosshairs blessed by Titan's forges. My stylus jumped across data slate surface as if drawn by magnetism, settling on authorization sigil that matched familiar geometry. The pattern bore elements I had glimpsed in refraction protocol documentation, not merely inquisitorial rosette, but specific configuration unique to personal seal. Sanctity glyphs bled clear fluid, where redacted blocks had hidden identity beneath blessed obscuration. The revelation struck with cold certainty. Valen's sigil matched the third counterseal from Basilica documentation, authorization block that had wept tears where names were burned away. He had signed both creation and destruction, alpha and omega, of bureaucratic necessity, treating worlds like chess pieces in games played across centuries. Confession through operational necessity, Valen's transmission continued with weight of terrible honesty. Refraction protocol authorization was mine. I signed the counterseal. Pattern familiar from previous deployment. Similar manifestation. Similar failure. We are here because I brought us here. Above the altar, dust motes coalesced into familiar geometry. Valen's personal sigil rendered in perfect detail, each element precisely formed in floating ash. The image held for measured heartbeat, then dissolved with insulting ease, leaving only phosphorescent approval while mercury flowed backward through iron veins. The triple knell evolved, 3 beats becoming 4, then 9 faint ticks counting toward crescendo I dreaded to witness. Time collapsed as the window narrowed, ash settling like snow on blessed stone while choices ripened into right. Duty always drinks the bitter cup first, and the countdown had begun. Duty always drinks the bitter cup first, and the countdown had begun. We descended toward the sphere's heart through architecture that refused coherent angles, each step carrying us deeper, while geometry flickered between configurations that hurt to observe directly. The staircase looped, back on itself in impossible spirals, returning us to landings we had not yet reached, while gravity lurched sideways at irregular intervals, pulling us against walls that became floors without transition. Environmental hazards escalated beyond atmospheric disturbance. Heat rose from floor stones in rhythmic waves, then cold swept in like tidal surge, temperature fluctuations synchronized with the transformed knell. Ash fell indoors like slow snow, despite sealed cathedral spaces, each flake settling on devotional ledges with deliberate precision that defied ventilation patterns. The recurring motif evolved with mathematical precision, 3, 4, 9, now cycling down through composite numbers towards 0 between pulses. Not countdown with numerals, but pattern collapse, harmonic frequencies dissolving towards silence that would birth something vast. My chronometer marked exactly 44 seconds between each settling pulse. Temporal coordinates approaching manifestation, the documentation warned against witnessing. Breaching charges responded to spatial distortion with impossible behavior. When Purifier Enoch triggered melter bombs against sealed barriers, the explosives didn't detonate so much as disappear, leaving holes in air rather than stone. The apertures revealed passages that shouldn't exist, corridors extending through spaces too small to contain them, doorways opening onto chambers positioned above our current location, yet somehow accessible through downward movement. Euclidean failure. Tech Adept Hark transmitted through binary cant pitched below audible range. Spatial metrics corrupted by Blackstone resonance. Navigation requires non-linear approach vectors. We adapted by following heat gradients rather than architectural logic, pursuing warmth that rose from the sphere's location, regardless of apparent direction. The basilica folded around us like origami crafted from stone and blessed metal, passages intersecting at angles that existed only when observed peripherally. The core chamber pretended sanctuary by wearing familiar bones. Blackstone's sphere dominated the space, size of Land Raider, but perfectly spherical, its surface studded with iron skulls whose jaws clamped reliquary fragments. Every skull bore purity seals centuries old, their parchment blackened without flame. Mercury veins pulsed backward between eye sockets, silver fluid leaping into tributaries rather than flowing down. Each skull served as organic interface, teeth sunk into bone fragments that glowed with phosphorescent approval. The reliquaries weren't ornamental but functional. Saint bone capacitors storing devotional energy converted through Blackstone resonance into nourishment for whatever entity claimed residence within the sphere's heart. Purifier. Enoch approached with measured steps, removing his helmet to expose scarred features marked by decades of warfare against impossible horrors. His breathing remained steady despite environmental hazards, discipline anchored by fresh wards carved into flesh beneath armor plates. Without word, he knelt before the sphere, combat blade reflecting phosphorescent light from mercury veins. The ritual began with clinical precision. Enoch placed blade edge against tongue, blessed steel parting flesh with surgical care. Blood wept clear brine where metal touched tissue, each droplet steaming as it struck Blackstone's surface. He offered vow of unvoice. Warrior monk choosing silence over speech, identity over creed, duty over doctrine. His severed tongue fell onto sphere surface, flesh sizzling against Blackstone while mercury veins pulsed with increasing frequency. The iron skull's jaws loosened incrementally, clamps designed to contain beginning to serve conduction. Around the chamber, inverted flames lengthened, blue cones burning downward into wax while consuming light rather than generating illumination. The sphere's aura shifted as Enoch's sacrifice registered. Nullquire manifestation faltered throughout the basilica, silhouettes wavering like heat shimmer as devotional energy decreased. Above, pilgrims exhaled without vanishing for the first time in hours, their synchronized breathing creating pressure changes felt through floor vibrations. Ritual inscription followed blood offering. I traced reverse geometry on sphere surface, with stylus buzzing with wrong resonance, each line weeping silver-tinged fluid as blessed metal contacted Blackstone. The patterns resembled Aegis wards, but inverted, sacred mathematics turned inside out to create focusing elements for controlled dissolution. Hark chanted Binharik in minor keys, mechadendrites weaving through blessed circuitry, while the sphere shuddered in response. Its internal light flickered, phosphorescence dimming as the inverted hymn wavered into erratic rhythm. The triple knell staggered, 3 beats, 4, then silence that carried tremor like held breath. Environmental pressure built beyond tolerable parameters. The air pressed against my lips with metallic taste, each breath coating throat with residue that made swallowing painful. Humidity spiked beyond saturation, while temperature fluctuated in rhythm with the collapsing harmonic sequence. The entity found purchase in my unvoiced memory, replaying childhood catechism in reverse inside my skull. I felt my mouth trying to form words I no longer dared speak, muscle memory warring against survival instinct. The thing wanted to ride my consciousness out of this place, using familiar prayers as vehicles for propagation. Through careful mental contact, Justicar Mordian transmitted tactical assessment. Sphere responds to sacrifice. Local manifestation weakening. Pattern propagation continues beyond our influence. It seeks vector. The realization struck with terrible clarity. We could starve the local manifestation through controlled unhallowing, but the corruption had already seeded through sanctified channels. The entity needed transport mechanism, and my devotional memories provided perfect conduit for escape beyond basilica walls. My stylus jumped across data slate's surface as if drawn by magnetism, scratching mirror script without conscious direction. Steam rose from brass housing as electronics failed in cascade patterns, the device's machine spirit struggling with concepts beyond programming. The sphere pulsed once, mercury veins flaring with phosphorescent approval. Something vast stirred within Blackstone ribs, and I understood my presence here had never been coincidence but invitation. Someone had prepared a place for me at this feast of silence. It wanted me specifically, and through me, it would escape. It wanted me specifically, and through me, it would escape. But Purifier Enoch stepped between predator and prey with serene inevitability, his scarred features calm, despite the horror unfolding around us. Without word, he approached the sphere's negative luminance, ceramite boots making no whisper against polished stone, while Blackstone aura embraced him with hungry recognition. His aegis inscriptions began sizzling like brands against flesh, where blessed armor contacted the sphere's influence. Sacred silver heated to cherry brightness, while protective geometries unknotted themselves. Steam rising from armor seams as wards that had shielded him through centuries of demon war turned against their bearer. The transformation demanded witness, duty requiring observation of what sanctity became when inverted. Enoch unsealed his breastplate with ritual locks, each mechanism clicking with finality that made my stylus tremble against data slate surface. Beneath blessed ceramite lay flesh furrowed by old oaths, skin marked with silver filigree threading between ribs like sacred circuitry. The subcutaneous wiring pulsed with his heartbeat, augmetic enhancement allowing warrior monks to channel psychic energy through biological matrices. The ritual began with clinical precision. He reached into his own chest cavity beneath the gorget, fingers parting flesh with surgical care, while ribs cracked under deliberate pressure. Blood steamed in the chamber's consuming cold, each droplet forming crystalline patterns before striking stone. His breathing remained steady despite traumatic access, discipline anchored by decades of warfare against impossible enemies. He exposed his heart, muscle beating steadily despite violation, and began carving. The inverse titanic sigil etched itself with each heartbeat, blessed blade parting cardiac tissue like familiar lover. Each line stamped deeper with systolic pressure, while mercury veins throughout the sphere pulsed in sympathetic rhythm. His heart became living seal, biological anchor for transformation that turned sanctity into sustenance through controlled inversion. Tech-adept Hark maintained Binharic recitation in subvocal clicks, mechadendrites weaving through blessed circuitry while the sphere shuddered in response to Enoch's sacrifice. Sacred cant merged with mechanical precision, religious dread flowing like storm current through chamber acoustics. The inverted hymn wavered into erratic rhythm as harmonic foundations shifted beneath Blackstone ribs. Environmental snap followed ritual completion. Humidity dropped to razor frost in seconds, moisture crystallizing out of superheated air, while temperature plummeted beyond measurement. The null choir spasmed like oil film yanked taut, silhouettes losing coherence as devotional energy flow reversed through resonance chambers. Pressure inverted with pop, felt through inner ear, atmosphere rejecting its own physics. The sphere cracked with sound like breaking cathedral bells, fissures spreading across its surface in patterns resembling liturgical script. Phosphorescent light leaked through gaps while Iron Skull's jaws loosened incrementally, clamps designed to contain finally releasing their centuries-long grip. The inverted hymn collapsed into single tone, silence that carried weight of held breath. For one breathless moment, we had it contained. The entity's manifestation wavered throughout basilica structure, dust mote formations scattering without coherence, while the triple knell staggered into irregular rhythm. Above, pilgrims stirred in their silent devotion, some blinking for the first time in hours. Victory tasted like iron and ozone, brief as lightning, but triumph lasted only heartbeats before tactical reality reasserted itself. Telemetry, Sigma 9. Hark transmitted through binary cant. Astropathic scream detected. Pattern already seeded like watermark in 3 outgoing pilgrim convoys and beacon buoy. Systemic propagation confirmed beyond local containment. The crushing revelation struck with cold certainty. We had won the battle through sacrifice that cost everything. But the war spread through channels beyond our influence. Every prayer offered anywhere within influenced range had fed the growing manifestation. Hymnal data slates, displaying mirror script, while catechism sequences returned backward echoes through sanctified networks, faster than physical travel. Through hardened Vox channels, Inquisitor Valen's transmission cut across our momentary triumph with weight of terrible mathematics. Exterminatus, to proceed regardless of localized inversion success. Sanctic vows cyclonics armed. Countdown begins at 9. Environmental pressure shifted as orbital bombardment systems awakened. Through the basilica's consuming acoustics, I heard machinery cycling aboard the strike cruiser, blessed warheads preparing for planetary sterilization, while machine spirits sang hymns of ending. The ship's targeting arrays painted Sanctum Omicron with crosshairs sanctified by generations of tech adepts. Enoch collapsed against the sphere, his sacrifice complete but body failing under traumatic injury. The inverse sigil on his heart pulsed with phosphorescent approval, each beat weaker than the last, while blood pooled in geometric patterns around Blackstone base. His eyes remained clear despite approaching death, duty fulfilled through spiritual mathematics that balanced corruption against purification. Evacuation order confirmed. Valen's voice carried weight of autarch-level authority. All personnel to extraction point. Uplink tuning shard to cyclonics. Correct phase inversion where possible. I knelt beside the dying purifier, extracting Blackstone shard keyed to corrected harmonic frequencies. The fragment burned against my palm despite chamber cold, its surface etched with inverse geometry, designed to tune planet-killing fire toward erasing inverted watermarks embedded in devotional networks. The responsibility felt heavier than ceramite, more cutting than any blade. Through careful mental contact, Justicar Mordian transmitted final assessment. Local manifestation contained. Enoch's sacrifice sealed the breach, but threads already seeded cannot be recalled. They ride prayer frequencies beyond our reach. The sphere's cracks widened with sounds like snapping wire, phosphorescent light fading as the entity's local anchor dissolved. But across the subsector, contaminated prayer beads continued crackling when touched, blessed oils congealing in their vials, hymnal displays showing text that hurt to read directly. Above, cyclonic torpedoes began their descent through charged atmosphere, saint-etched housings warming with atmospheric friction. The countdown had begun, and we had minutes to reach extraction before fire fell from heaven like judgment. The countdown had begun, and cyclonic fire would fall in minutes measured by heartbeats rather than chronometers. We left Purifier Enoch's body beside the cracked sphere, his sacrifice sealing the local breach, while phosphorescent light faded from mercury veins like dying stars. The Blackstone shard burned against my palm through reinforced gloves, its corrected frequencies awaiting integration with planet-killing mathematics that would tune orbital fire toward erasing contaminated prayer networks across the subsector. Evacuation became nightmare of geometry that refused coherent logic. Corridors consumed sound with predatory hunger. our footsteps vanishing mid-stride while only struggling light remained to guide passage through architecture that writhed in its death throes. The basilica folded back on itself like origami crafted from blessed stone, passages intersecting at angles that existed only when observed peripherally, Gothic arches reshaping into configurations that hurt to comprehend directly. Justicamordian led staggered withdrawal through nave sections where residual manifestations prowled between pillars, not full silhouettes, but suggestions of absence, gaps where light died rather than faded. The Grey Knights engaged with silent blade work, nemesis weapons flickering as they parted void stuff that tried reforming, around blessed steel. Each strike sent sparks cascading in nameless colours, electromagnetic discharge painting impossible spectra across cathedral shadows. Environmental hazards multiplied as structural integrity collapsed under empiric pressure. Ash gales howled through stairwells despite sealed architecture, particulate matter moving with malevolent intelligence through spaces too small to contain atmospheric disturbance. The ash clung to armor joints like seeking fingers, each flake settling with deliberate precision that spelled words in languages predating human settlement before dissolving into ordinary dust. Brine mist accumulated in archways, moisture that tasted of copper pennies and burnt incense, while climbing walls in defiance of gravitational law. The substance moved with subtle purpose, forming geometric patterns before splashing against stone surfaces, pooling in carved inscriptions and filling blessed script with liquid shadow that pulsed in rhythm with the transformed knell. Brother Castiel established rearguard overwatch, Psycanon humming with barely contained energy as targeting systems painted amber dots on shadows that moved wrong. His weapon discharged in measured bursts, promethium gushing in white-orange fans that should have thundered but fell inward, devoured by hungry silence. Only heat remained, greasy warmth that clung to ceramite, while acoustics died in throats that existed as negation. In a transept where stained glass had sloughed itself like shed skin, saints reduced to heaps of coloured grit that moved when drafts breathed through broken casements, a pilgrim child emerged from confessional booth. She couldn't be more than 7 years old, wearing novice robes dusted with ash, her eyes open and unblinking, while lips moved through prayers muscle memory demanded but survival forbade. She hummed without sound. The chord of 9 inverted into melody that grated against comprehension, each note seeking purchase in my throat, like parasites seeking host. Her innocence, untouched by the horrors we faced, made her perfect vessel for the very thing we sought to contain. The triple knell echoed from somewhere deep within my jaw, vibrations felt through bone conduction rather than heard through air. I moved without conscious thought, covering the child's mouth with robe fabric, gentle but firm pressure, preventing vocalization that would feed residual manifestations. She didn't resist, small body trembling against my arm as I guided her toward extraction point. Her eyes remained wide, focused on something beyond visible spectrum, while wooden rosary beads clicked once like small animal joints before falling still. Tech-adept Hark's mechadendrites traced dying current through wall-mounted lecterns, discovering blackstone fragments that continued pulsing with phosphorescent approval despite local containment. The heretical engineering sparked with final discharge, blessed circuitry weeping clear brine as anti-psychic materials completed their inverted functions one last time. Vox communications fractured into telegraphic bursts as electromagnetic interference peaked throughout cathedral structure. Dock, Bay, 3. Mordian transmitted through hardened channels before static consumed frequency entirely. Hand signs replaced verbal commands while we navigated passages where sound went to die, following temperature gradients toward extraction point. At the transept drop bay, discovery waited like accusation carved in adamantine. Inquisitor Valen's rosette lay on the deck, where boot treads had scuffed shallow circle around it, its ornate geometry catching phosphorescent light from wall-mounted lumens. The artifact's edge bore engraving identical to authorization sigils from refraction protocol documentation, confirmation of complicity that couldn't be denied. I pocketed the rosette without ceremony, adamantine warm against my palm, despite chamber cold. The Grey Knights maintained professional discipline, securing bay perimeter while avoiding direct acknowledgement of what the artifact represented. Their duty transcended personal loyalty, but questions would follow once immediate crisis passed. The bay doors opened on sky filling with descending fire. Cyclonic torpedoes fell through charged atmosphere like metal tears, their saint-etched housings warming with atmospheric friction, while blessed warheads prepared for planetary sterilization. Each torpedo bore litanies of ending inscribed in high Gothic script that blurred as heat built, silver letters shedding flakes like snow that spiraled before subliming. Environmental pressure shifted as orbital bombardment approached. The air tasted of ozone and burnt incense, each breath coating throats with metallic residue, while the basilica's machine spirits keened in frequencies that bypassed ears and struck directly at nervous systems. Through floor vibrations, I felt the cathedral's death song building toward crescendo. Our storm raven waited on the platform, hull accumulating crystalline script frost in patterns that hurt to observe directly. The pilot's vox crackled. Extraction window closing. Departure in 60 seconds. Below, Basilica Harmonia prepared to die, its Gothic spires reaching toward heaven filled with fire. The child hummed silently against my palm, and I felt something vast stir in depths beyond reach. The child hummed silently against my palm, and something vast stirred in depths beyond reach as our storm raven lifted from the platform, with engines screaming liturgies through armored housings that could not carry sound. We punched through charged atmosphere towards Sanctic Vow's waiting embrace, while cyclonic torpedoes fell past us like metal tears, their saint-etched housings warming with atmospheric friction. Below, Basilica Harmonia prepared to receive absolution. The cathedral's Gothic spires reached towards sky filling with descending fire, each warhead bearing centuries of sanctified prayers inscribed in high Gothic script that blurred under building heat. Silver letters shed like snow, spiraling before subliming into vapor that tasted of ozone and burnt incense. Docking clamps caught with shudder that made the child's teeth click under my palm. We spilled into Sanctic Vow's chapel like ghosts from furnace, ash smoking off armor while void seals irised shut. The Grey Knights removed helmets for the first time in hours, scarred faces lit by fire streaming through stained ceramite windows. They attempted to chant, not aloud but in synchronized thought, reclaiming creed at terrible cost. Brother Castiel's lips moved through familiar litanies, but throat tissues remained scarred where prayers had burned before reaching air. Justicar Mordian fared little better, voice reduced to whisper that carried weight of centuries spent in warfare against impossible enemies. Several would remain mute forever, their ability to vocalize devotion sacrificed to contain what should never have awakened. I slotted the Blackstone shard into cogitator lectern positioned before main viewport, blessed circuitry accepting fragment with mechanical reluctance. Corrected frequencies integrated with cyclonic targeting matrices, tuning planet-killing fire toward erasing inverted watermarks embedded in devotional networks. Each warhead adjusted detonation patterns, seeking to burn away corruption-riding prayer frequencies through sanctified channels. Exterminatus confirmed, transmitted through hardened channels while authorization seals burned into adamantine wafers. Seal consumed, target sterilized. Clinical language wrapped around horror like shroud over corpse, duty demanding precision even in destruction. Atmospheric ignition began with stratified sheets cascading across Sanctum Omicron's surface. Air itself caught fire in layers, oxygen burning in precise bands while cities became bowls of molten glass. Basilica Harmonia fractured into singing shards that caught light like crystal fragments before subliming into thermal bloom painting observation deck in nameless colors. Through sensor arrays, Tech Adept Hark monitored purification progress across multiple spectra. Despite bombardment's thoroughness, 3 external data paths had propagated beyond local containment. Astropathic choir records detected faint echoes in distant systems, off-key harmonies suggesting corruption had seeded through prayer networks faster than physical travel. The Pyrrhic cost revealed itself in stages. Purifier Enoch died within reactor core, sacrifice ceiling breach while heart sigil beat, last against Blackstone that no longer existed. His body lay vitrified inside crater, become perfect glass bowl. Molecular structure reorganized by temperatures exceeding stellar fusion. Environmental monitoring showed systemic damage across pilgrim convoy routes. Prayer beads cracked when touched aboard distant transports. Blessed oils congealing in vials, while hymnal displays showed text hurting to read directly. Navigator Primaris aboard Faithful Endeavour reported crew humming absent-mindedly, melodies making second hearts skip, before aligning to 4-beat rhythms, wanting to become 9. The child sat wrapped in blessed blankets, while ship surgeon Valdris examined her for corruption signs. She appeared physically unharmed, but eyes remained wide and unblinking, focused beyond visible spectrum. When she breathed, frost formed on observation glass despite environmental controls. Through viewport, Sanctum Omicron's remains glowed like dying coal, while warp stormfronts closed around sterilized system. The shrine moon protecting pilgrim routes for 3 millennia existed now only as expanding cloud of superheated gas. Devotional purpose ended in fire burning away both corruption and cure. Containment order issued, Valen announced through ship-wide vox, voice carrying Ordo Malleus authority. Mark coordinates in black. Purge all hymnals leaving orbit. Quarantine flagged systems. Bureaucratic language obscured theological horror. Prayers themselves had become vectors for something feeding on faith. I coughed suddenly, tasting copper. Something thin came up. No phlegm but filament of silver ink letters, each glyph backward, shining with wet intelligence. It lay across my palm like hair, writhed once, seeking the dark of my mouth as if remembering roads it wanted. The triple knell answered from far below hearing threshold. 3, then 4, then beginning of 9. The corruption had found its vector. The corruption had found its vector, and I became unwilling archive of what should never be preserved. The silver filament writhed across my palm with muscular purpose, each letter seeking return to throat where childhood prayers waited like kindling for heretical flame. I closed fingers around it, feeling script burn through skin while the triple knell counted time in heartbeats, felt through bone conduction. 3, then 4, then beginning of 9, that made my teeth ache. Ordo Malleus issued containment order with bureaucratic precision that wrapped horror in familiar protocols. Mark Sanctum Omicron's coordinates in black. Do not return. Do not speak its name. Forget it existed, except as cautionary notation in classified archives. Purge all hymnals leaving orbit under pain of summary execution. Quarantine 3 flagged systems where astropathic echoes carried faint harmonies, suggesting infection had seeded through prayer networks faster than light-speed travel. I underwent purification rites in quiet vault beneath Sanctic Vows Chapel, where blessed silver-lined walls and candles refused to light despite proper liturgical preparation. The chamber's acoustics consumed sound with predatory hunger, each whisper dying before reaching consecrated stone. Ship surgeon Valdris examined corruption signs with instruments that sparked against blessed metal, discovering microscopic, silver ink letters crawling beneath skin like parasites seeking neural pathways. Each glyph pulsed with rhythm matching the transformed knell, clustering around larynx in configurations resembling liturgical script written backward. They moved toward vocal cords with deliberate purpose, spelling words in languages predating human settlement, while counting down toward manifestation I could not allow. The medical scanner displayed impossible readings, living text that wanted voice, wanted prayer, wanted transport beyond this place through devotional memories. I filed sealed report through encrypted channels, clinical language barely containing dread that pressed against comprehension like weight of deep ocean. Each word required careful selection, avoiding phrases that might trigger mimetic cascade through sanctified networks. The stylus trembled against data slate surface, as if electronics themselves recoiled from documenting impossibility. Valen's rosette lay heavy in my pocket, adamantine warm against palm despite Volt's consuming cold. The artifact served as silent indictment, evidence of complicity spanning decades, authorization signatures linking him to horrors across multiple worlds. I chose silence over accusation, understanding that some knowledge carried weight exceeding immediate justice. The choice came with personal cost, measured in flesh and faith. I retrieved ritual knife from Blessed Kit, its edge honed to monomolecular precision through generations of purification rites. The blade felt heavier than ceramite as I placed it against tongue where corruption sought purchase, silver letters pulsing beneath tissue like eager parasites. The act was swift, precise, surgical. Blood steamed in Volt's cold, pooling on steel plate etched with Titan's sigil, while blessed metal seared against flesh. Sanctified geometry burned away corruption through direct contact, silver filaments writhing once before dissolving into mercury that spelled final words in mirror script before subliming into vapor. Environmental monitoring detected immediate changes. The triple knell faltered. 3 beats, silence, then nothing. Temperature stabilized. Humidity returned to normal parameters. The corruption's primary vector had been severed, its pathway to propagation closed through sacrifice that would leave me forever changed. But victory remained provisional. Through hardened Vox channels, reports arrived from distant systems confirming systemic spread beyond local containment. Navigator aboard Pilgrim Transport Faithful Endeavour hummed absent-mindedly during routine calculations, melody making second hearts skip before aligning to 4-beat rhythm wanting to become 9. Prayer wheels aboard Shrine Ship Devotion's Crown spun backward despite blessed mechanisms designed for clockwise rotation. The Grey Knights departed without ceremony, their duty paid through sacrifice that would haunt centuries. Brother Castiel remained mute, throat scarred where prayers had burned. Justica Mordian spoke only in whispers, voice carrying weight of knowledge that could not be shared. They bore scars visible and hidden, warriors forever changed by warfare against enemy that fed on faith itself. Fridge hush settled over Black Vault while candles refused illumination, blessed wax remaining cold despite proper liturgical preparation. The air tasted of ozone and something metallic that coated the back of my throat. Through floor vibrations, I felt the ship's machine spirits adjusting course, carrying us away from sterilized coordinates toward duties that would never speak of what we witnessed. I sealed final log with trembling stylus, each word requiring careful selection to avoid triggering mimetic cascade. The documentation would join classified archives where knowledge too dangerous for general circulation waited like sleeping predator. Future investigators might discover fragments, but complete picture remained locked beneath sanctity seals and inquisitorial authority. Lines of reverse script continued crawling under skin despite surgical removal of primary infection vector, seeking new pathways through biological architecture. The corruption adapted with terrifying intelligence, learning from each failed attempt while building toward eventual breakthrough that might take decades to manifest. In distant systems, pilgrims knelt in silent devotion while something vast stirred in spaces between words, counting down toward crescendo measured in heartbeats rather than chronometers. The null choir sang without sound, and its song would never end. My final entry bore weight of terrible understanding, fingers steady despite absence of voice. Seal this log. Mark coordinates. Never speak the name in air again.